Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Yusuf Aram. It was a first in aviation history, an unmanned fighter jet shooting down an airborne target with its own onboard radar. Turkiye's drone powerhouse Baykar beat out U.S. rivals Boeing to achieve the feat. Dubbed the loyal wingman, the Kizilelma is set to take Turkiye's aviation power to new heights. But as unmanned fighters push into roles once reserved for pilots, how far could this reshape the future of air combat? The test took place over the Black Sea near Turkiye's Sinop province. It was the first time a Turkish aircraft fired an indigenously built air-to-air missile guided by a homegrown radar system and hit an aerial target. President Erdogan hailed the moment as proof of Turkiye's accelerating technological momentum. Days later, Boeing conducted a similar demonstration. But unlike Kizilelma, the MQ-28 relied on external detection rather than its own sensors. Kizilelma could reach speeds close to Mach 1 and operates with a combat radius of roughly 500 nautical miles. Baykar says the program's development has already surpassed the $1 billion mark, making it one of the largest investments in the Turkish defense industry. For more, joining me now from Ankara is Yusuf Emir Işık. He's the chief editor at Defense Türk. From Toronto, Bilal Khan, a defense analyst and founder of KUA Defense News and Analysis Group. And from Paris, Federico Borsari, a non-resident fellow with the Transatlantic Defense and Security Program at the Center for European Policy Analysis. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me. I mean, when we look at aviation history, it seems like a significant moment. The Kizilelma using an onboard radar, an indigenous onboard radar, to launch a very successful air-to-air strike. Now, I want to start with Yusuf. What does this mean? Is this as significant as I think it is, or no, it's something that could be achieved easily?
So this world first is highly significant because it demonstrates the level of combat capability that only a few nations have achieved so far. So in previous years, we saw UAVs that tested with infrared guided air-to-air missiles, but Kizilelma's test was fundamentally different. So here the platform launched Gökdoğan, an RF guided air-to-air missile, which is developed by State Institute, TÜBİTAK SAGE. And as you said, during the test, Kizilelma relied entirely on its own Murat AESA radar, which is also developed by another Turkish company, Aselsan, to complete the engagement. So this means Kizilelma executed the full kill chain, including detecting, tracking, identifying, and also engaging the target using only its onboard sensors. So doing this with RF-guided missile requires precise mid-course updates and advanced fire control luggage. So this represents a major leap beyond previous infrared-based demonstrations. And when contrasted with other leading systems, the distinction becomes clearer. So for instance, last week, MQ-28 Ghostbat, which is developed by Boeing, had a test with AIM-120 air-to-air missile. This test was an also important milestone, but it depended on external assets such as E-7 Wedgetail aircraft and F-18 fighter jets for targeting data and situational awareness. So in that engagement, Ghostbat functioned primarily as a shooter within man-supported network. So during the test, we know that F-18 detected the target and then passed the track. Then E-7 provided the final authority to fire. Kizilelma, on the other hand, demonstrated the ability to act as an independent combat asset that making decisions based on its own sensor.
Okay. All right, thank you. I think it's interesting that you brought up the MQ-28. And Bilal, I want to ask you about that because having these two tests very close to each other, okay, the Kizilelma had the onboard radar and obviously the MQ-28 used assistance in tracking with the radar. But when you look at the specs of these two unmanned fighter jets, are they going to be competitors? Is one better than the other? How do you see the future of these two? Will they be linked by having their tests so close to each other, or are they completely different markets?
You know what? I would lean on the point that they're basically going to be from completely different markets. A lot of American equipment, especially the next generation equipment, is very much controlled. In general, you will not see those systems in the Middle East anytime soon. For example, and I think one of the big advantages that the Turkish defense industry has is that it's very overt and very open about engaging the markets that the Americans would typically not engage. Essentially, now, in terms of specifications and capabilities, it's like I wouldn't go into that sort of comparison because I think the nature of drone development is that, especially even with jet powered fighter drones, is that you'll have a very diverse array of systems that'll each be, trying to fill a very specific niche and set of requirements. I also would want to point that the OEM of this unit, like Baykar Group, they have a very strong vision in terms of autonomizing fighter combat, taking the man or pilot or air crew out of the loop basically as much as possible. So they have a very distinct mission in this sense, and I think they're going to push both through this platform and in future development as well to really push that angle of air-to-air combat. I know the note about it being the first true autonomous beyond visual range air-to-air demonstration, but at the same time, with future air combat, we will see a whole mix of capabilities in the flow basically. So you will see autonomous air-to-air capabilities. You will see crewed and uncrewed aircraft, collaborating as well, and that's something also the wider Turkish defense industry is working towards as well. In addition to autonomous operations, so I would say, in the broad sense, like the Turkish defense industry, especially Baykar Group and others, are definitely on the right track, and we will probably see more solutions. Not just this one as well.
Frederica, what do you think NATO countries were thinking while watching this demonstration? I mean, can you envision the Kizilelma being part of a NATO fleet, being part of NATO missions as a loyal wingman? And if so, how far in the future would that be?
I think that's definitely, Turkey, not only because it demonstrated that it can really, push forward a lot of technological field of unmanned systems, as the other guests have remarked. But I think it's also clear that by doing that, Turkey is also showing that it can do it domestically, and it can rely on its own kind of expertise, skills, and resources to develop an entire, let's say, categories of platforms, systems, subsystems as well, because as the guests have remarked, Turkey did the demonstration with its own technological solutions, right? The Kizilelma, its own radar, active type of radar, its own domestically developed missiles, the Gokdogan. So I think what it shows is that Turkey can do it, in its own way. And when it comes to Turkey being part of NATO, it also means that as an ally, it can provide some of the critical capabilities that the alliance is also looking for in terms of developing and integrating them for future combat scenarios. And so Turkey can be a critical player because it can shape also how the alliance set the capability targets and the requirements, and also how it will use those capabilities as part of the NATO regional plans that are now being implemented. So that means that Turkey can really have a role in the planning process, can have a role in influencing the decisions regarding the capability requirements. And by doing that, it also means that in when the operations or where also the exercise take place, Turkey can be a critical actor because it has the capabilities and it can provide the alliance with those capabilities, whereas other countries are not at that stage yet. And I think in this respect, Turkey within the NATO alliance is one of the few countries that is able to really deploy advanced loyal wingman type of platforms. Of course, the United States are also experimenting a lot with those systems, and other countries are in Europe are working on similar concepts. But Turkey has done it first, right? And especially when it comes to the to using its own, radar, onboard radar in the wingman itself. It shows that it really Turkey has developed significant capabilities, and I think that, as the other guests remarked, it's kind of unique because there have been other experimentation with onboard missiles with unmanned systems, but it was a different process. Targeting was provided by other platforms, and the missiles type was also different. So in this case, as Bilal and the other guests remarked, the drone was able to close its own kill chain in a way. And so I think when it comes to Turkey being part of NATO, it can really provide something that other countries are not able to provide. And it's also interesting because in this way you can also have more influence in shaping also regional approaches to security, and it can also be an important leverage, for instance, in military cooperation with other countries, because it paves the way for a lot of different opportunities in terms of export. And as we have seen with Italy, for instance, Turkish drones have been really a center and a key element of the current cooperation at the industry level with Italy. So I think this really speaks volumes about how important it is for Turkey this kind of development.
It definitely does. I want to move forward with the balance of power in the region, Yusuf. I mean, you have Israel fielding F-35s, you have Greece fielding Rafales, upgraded F-16s. You have Russia fielding Su-35s, Su-47s, 57s. So there's some actors in the region that have a lot of capability when it comes to air power. You have Turkey with an aging F-16 fleet. It looks like it's going to modernize the F-16s with a new modernization kits coming soon. You have the potential for Eurofighter Typhoons coming in the coming years. You have the Kizilelma, hopefully going to be in inventory soon. Where does the addition of Kizilelma rank Turkey when we look at the balance of power of the region?
So actually, when assessing where Turkey stands in the global hierarchy of drone powers, it's important to begin with United States, which has invested in autonomous air combat technologies for many years. For example, programs such as air combat evaluation and alpha dogfight trials shows how early and how seriously the United States approached algorithmic dogfighting, sensor fusion, and human-machine teaming. So as a result, United States remains one of the leading actors in this domain. However, Kizilelma's recent Gökdoğan tests marks a notable turning point. So the fact that the platform launched RF-guided air-to-air missile and completed the entire engagement using only its own radar represents a capability that no other unmanned combat aircraft has demonstrated so far. So this positions Turkey among the front-running nations in unmanned air combat technology. And at the same time, this achievement also highlights the different strategic mentality between Turkey and the United States. So it's essential to point out that Kizilelma is not designed as a classic disposable loyal wingman. So we know that Baykar's goal is to create a drone that behaves more like a fighter jet than a low-cost support platform. So this marks a notable divergence in mindset. For example, with collaborative combat aircraft program, United States focuses on drones that primarily assist pilots by taking on electronic attack, strike missions or also ISR missions. In contrast, Kizilelma is being engineered to assume roles such as air policing, beyond visual range intercepts, and even close-range air combat. I mean, dogfights when necessary. Also, I mean, it's about the world. It's not about just about the region, but we have China on the other hand. So China presents a more uncertain picture because country has a large number of UAV and missile or sensor development programs, but the real world performance of these systems is often unclear. So due to limited transparency, it remains difficult to make a definitive comparison or to validate their operational maturity. Although their platforms appear impressive on paper, independently verified data is rare. So in conclusion, Kizilelma's latest test places Turkey firmly in the top tier alongside major powers like United States or China. So more importantly, it demonstrates that Turkey is becoming a nation that capable of introducing innovations and also setting new benchmarks in the field of aerial warfare.
Bilal, I want to ask you, I mean, after the development phase and obviously real world tests coming into the inventory, I think one of the most important gauges for sustainability for a project like Kizilelma is financial feasibility. And part of that financial feasibility is, can you export it? Can you sell it? So who's going to be the potential customers for Kizilelma? Who's going to be interested in it?
Yeah, so I mean, from Baykar's own, promotional activities and even the wider Turkish defense industry push, definitely, you have the Middle East market from the Gulf, for example, potentially North Africa where possible. You also have Central Asia as well they'll be looking at. And obviously the big one, at least from, the work that we do, is the Pakistani market. We know, for example, Baykar is, according to Bloomberg, in talks with the Pakistan Air Force to set up a local assembly plant for their drones, which typically indicates that the Pakistan Air Force, possibly the other service arms as well, like the Pakistan Navy, like we know that Baykar has been promoting drones to them as well. They're basically potentially embarking on a much larger order in order to sustain that production plant. So these will be the main export pushes primarily, I would imagine. And obviously, one of the things is that, as mentioned by Yusuf here, and this system itself, it's not something that's typically available on the market, right? And again, we know the Chinese are developing it, and we can have confidence within the Chinese systems, but at the end of the day, one of the incentives of a big major region of a global power is to essentially control or influence their buyers, right? To basically have a closed loop. So the Pakistan Air Force, there basically would be left with two options, whether it's to go all in on the Chinese and basically be dependent on that entire stack for good or the challenges that it presents. And the challenges would be is that, your ability to customize those solutions, your ability to incorporate your own defense industry into those things, your ability to potentially use them in the ways you want, according to your doctrine, like you would have to basically align your training, logistics, and maintenance to the Chinese procedures, which for a country that has traditionally trained on Western approaches might be a bit of a shift. And it remains to be seen how comfortable they are to go into full shift, right? Like right now, they are dependent on a technology standpoint, but they generally adapt the Chinese system to their own processes. But as you get into the more advanced stuff, you're going to have to adopt those things, end to end. And the advantage that the Turkish defense industry and Baykar offer in particular is that they're able to modularize and sort of fit into the wider picture. I think that's one of the big reasons why Leonardo signed an agreement with them, for example, and partner with them, is because they know that this is a technology partner, right? This is not a client supplier relationship. This is going to be a step towards building original solutions.
It's very interesting that you said that because I've interviewed Selçuk Bayraktar a couple of times. And every time I interview him, he always points that out. He's like, we're not a drone company. He's like, we're a tech company. He likes to point that out a lot. And I found it interesting that you're pointing that out too. And since you're talking about the relationship between Baykar and Italy, I want to expand that then. Federico, what do you think about that relationship between Baykar and Leonardo, their acquisition of Piaggio, and what more it can do with countries maybe like in the UK, in Spain, and Germany? Do you see Baykar as one of the pioneers of the Turkish defense industry, penetrating Europe and also cooperating with Europe?
Answer to your last question is definitely one of the most tangible of how the Turkish defense industry has been able to not only develop in the last few decades, but also to become really an important actor in the landscape of the defense market in general, and also in terms of market opportunities and penetration in the European defense market. That definitely Baykar is a leading actor in this respect. But also, I think when it comes to the current relationship with Italy and the Italian defense industry, I think it's a testament of the importance of cooperation among allies, and of course when it comes to NATO and NATO Europe in particular, because Yusuf, Bilal have rightly mentioned the role of the United States in pioneering some of the technologies that we are seeing today in terms of large drones playing important roles on the battlefield. But at the end of the day, many European countries have lagged behind in this technology because either they have relied on US technology for their own kind of capability requirements, or at the same time they have not invested sufficient resources in this type of technology, either because there was no interest in doing that, or because as I said, the U.S. technology was already filling some of the gaps that they were facing, and so now they reached a point where they are without the necessary technologies that they need, and so that's also why Turkey is an important partner in this respect, because it can also help fill the gap, especially in the short and medium term, as other countries also invest in drone technology. But when it comes to Italy, there's also an important thing to remember, that Italy is also working on a 6th-generation fighter jet with Japan and the UK. And a loyal wingman is certainly part of that discussion and part of that development. And so I think there's a, and Leonardo is of course a critical partner in that project. So I think it's obvious that a partnership between Baykar and Leonardo is also a way for Baykar to kind of shape a little bit the discussion around that type of capability, because Baykar has already won, even though it's not in the advancement stage that the 6th-generation fighter expects from a loyal wingman, especially in the future, but is working on it, is as a prototype, is testing at the Kizilelma, is using it repeatedly. And so I think for Baykar is also an opportunity to kind of being part of that discussion. And I can see in the future, a potential kind of convergence between some of the Baykar technologies and what we are seeing in for the global combat air program, which is the 6th-generation fighter jet that I mentioned. Mm-hmm. This is just my speculation, but I think it's the partnership is also a reminder that Turkey can be a reliable partner when it comes to defense technology, and especially at a time where China, as the other guest rightly remembered, is investing massive amounts of resources to develop its own kind of array of drones and autonomous systems, and the United States are also investing in that capability segment. But Europeans are not, with few exceptions, are not as as capable or able to muster the resources for that kind of effort yet.
Guys, thanks for a great conversation, but we're out of time. There's still so much I wanted to get into, such as dogfights and updates coming forward with better artificial intelligence, what that could mean, but we are out of time. Hopefully we can do this again in the coming months. Thanks for joining me, Yusuf, Bilal, Federico, it was a great conversation. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Yusuf Aram. If you got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find more exclusive content. Until next time, take care and goodbye.